Good evening, everyone. My name is Darren Q, and I am the Dean here at the Kroc School of Peace Studies, and it's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all here tonight. We're extremely happy to have you here. I think it's a common mistake to assume that environment does not include us. When you hear people talk about the environment, it sounds like, at least in the media or in common parlance, people are talking about trees or animals or that sort of thing. But we're deeply impacted by our environment as much as we shape it, and the two things are inextricably connected. And from the beginning of time, of course, the movement of peoples has been driven in large part by environmental factors. Immigration and environment are deeply, deeply linked. The World Bank projects that climate change alone could displace over 200 million people within their own countries by 2050, 3/4 of whom will be in the global south. And that's just from weather impacts. The larger economic and social impacts could be much further reaching than that. So we could be talking about very large chunks of humanity being impacted, and the movement of people worldwide within our lifetimes is only increasing. And as we all know, the environment does not respect borders. And no one knows this better than folks living in the Tijuana River Basin, where immigration and climate issues walk hand in hand. Tonight's event helps to restore the humanity to this equation of immigration and climate and underscores how interconnected we are across our region and how binational and interdisciplinary cooperation are the only way that we can address both. University of San Diego as a university is deeply committed to cross-border issues, and all the schools and the college across campus are working on these. Here at the Kroc School, the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice's Cross-Border Initiatives program has recently selected a new cohort of border fellows, an interdisciplinary group of researchers and community activists. They are working on innovative strategies to prevent violence among border youth, promote the defense and exercise of the rights of indigenous people at the border, support violence prevention through education for migrants belonging to racialized groups, combat discrimination against women, and address armed violence in vulnerable communities through comprehensive firearms control policies. We are partnering with the Mulvaney Center here at the Institute for Peace and Justice and various schools across USD, including the Canal School of Business, to bring people from both sides of the border together. Our goal is to foster cross-border collaboration and facilitate dialogue on the impact of current immigration policies on our region. Throughout the year, we are developing a series of publications focused on the consequences of deportations. These will feature insights from local experts and partners, highlighting the profound effects deportations have on our border communities. So check us out here at the Kroc School and learn more about what we're doing, and please, if it interests you, please partner with us. Please reach out. We're very interested in connecting to folks here in our community in the greater San Diego region and, of course, across the border I'm told we call it now Cali Baja. Is that correct, this whole area here? I've heard this phrase, Cali Baja. I just came from Boston in the last 10 months, and I find it really interesting that we are one greater region in this area, and I'm excited to learn more about it. I'm going to introduce my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Casares, who is the Director of Cross-Border Initiatives at the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. She's a physician and public health specialist. Her work focuses on violence prevention, migration, peace building, and binational collaboration at the U.S.-Mexico border. And she has extensive experience working with underserved populations in Tijuana as a health provider, researcher, and developing community programs. She has been a member of the Socio-Environmental Tijuana River Project since 2020. So please join me in welcoming my colleague, Dr. Rebecca Casares. Rebecca, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. As Ardeen said, I am part of the Tijuana River Socio-Environmental Project and the Director of Cross-Border Initiatives here at the Kroc Institute for Peace and Justice. The Kroc IPJ, for those of us who don't know, is an applied research institute whose core mission is to co-create learning with other peacemakers from different backgrounds, different skills, and as diverse a group as we can get. So this project is not the exception. We have the research projects, PI Aleli Calderon joining us today as a panelist, and so is the co-creator Sara Gonzalez with us too. The whole idea of this was to look at the Tijuana River and its population and look at the intersection of social justice and environmental justice. This is a binational effort, and so far it has been mostly focused on the Tijuana side and on what we can do on that side. This is the third time that this event has been created, and this is the first time we're doing it in San Diego. The idea going forward is that we can look to folks on this side of the border and see and look at what we've done so far and see how we can translate some of those the policy brief that we've developed and the proposals that have been developed, and see how we can move forward with more binational collaboration. I'd like to start us off with a clip that talks a little bit about what the Tijuana River Socio-Environmental Project has been doing, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Next, we'll have a panel discussion, and hopefully we'll have an open discussion with all of you about the issues that are featured in the films. So I'd like to present our panelists who will be joining us. We have Tara Stamus-Busing. She's the founder and executive director of the Harm Reduction Coalition of San Diego Mobile Sewage Exchange Program On Point. Tara is a harm reduction specialist, substance use counselor, case manager, and social worker with 30-plus years of experience and deep knowledge of community needs across San Diego. She has both professional and lived experience with harm reduction and has successfully engaged people who inject drugs and key academic, government, and community stakeholders in harm reduction research and practice. Sara Alejandra Gonzalez holds a degree in environmental management and economics from the University of Guadalajara and a graduate specialization in integrated water management from El Colegio de la Frontera Norte. She has worked with civil society organizations focused on environmental sustainability and has served as the director of the Municipal Youth Institute of Tijuana and as the head of the Office of the Protection of Human Rights Defenders and Journalists at the State Subsecretariat for Human Rights. She is a co-founder of the Tijuana River Socio-Environmental Project, and she has also worked with the Trust for the Americas, affiliated with the Organization of American States, and served as a coordinator at the Municipal Institute for Women in Tijuana, where she developed community and gender-focused mobility projects. And Aleli Calderon Villarreal is a Mexican physician, researcher, and current assistant professor at the Department of Public Health at the California State University, San Marcos. Aleli founded and directs the binational socio-environmental Tijuana River Project since 2019, a U.S.-Mexico transdisciplinary mixed methods research project which combines research and advocacy on environmental structural violence. Her research interests include environmental health and justice, substance use, health equity, access to water, sanitation and hygiene, structural violence, gender, menstrual health, migration, mental health, and health policies. She is particularly interested in the intersection between harm reduction and the environmental health fields, particularly among people who use drugs in San Diego and Tijuana region. Welcome, Aleli. We'll also have the QR code, so you can please share thoughts, questions, any feedback you have on the event and on the films, and it'll help us keep the conversation going. Could we turn on the lights to see the public?
It's really bright. I can't see.
Oh, sorry, we had a question? Yeah.
I didn't come prepared, but I think it was here. About 20 years ago, there was a gentleman who came to Tijuana.
sorry.
I apologize, it may be before you younger people here. I think it was about 20 years ago, and I believe it was here. A gentleman from Tijuana came, and he had a project in which he had a small community on the hills in Tijuana. And what was remarkable was that they were, instead of installing a water system, he was using the old-fashioned way of letting water trickle through gravel and environment. And he actually was growing vegetables. So it was like a self-sustaining little community, and in which they were growing food, fresh vegetables and food, and they were cleaning the water because they were letting it go through the sediments. And it was remarkable. And like I said, I think it was several decades. I'm hoping somebody here is aware of this program. And I've not heard anything since then, and I haven't really Googled much to try to find it, but I can't find it. Does anyone here know about that? And it was supposed to be sort of a platform. He was trying to get funding to extend this into the area of Tijuana. But when they would test the water, it was absolutely pure. And it was functioning. And like I said, his vegetables and it was helping to have a nutritional basis for these people too. And they were, I think, homeowners, but very limited incomes. Does this ring a bell for anyone?
Yeah, maybe it was in Laureles Canyon, that is one of the binational canyons, and I think maybe it could be someone that has a long trajectory in environmental binational issues. That is called Oscar Romo. I don't know if that rings a bell. But yeah, there's a lot of projects going on, especially on that canyon specifically, because the water, it's a little bit higher, and what flows can be, trash, can be sewage, goes into the Tijuana River National Estuarine Research Reserve. And also, we found, it's something that the estuarine knows, that it's cheaper to work in Laureles Canyon in Mexico than to invest in taking the trash in the US side. So there has been a lot of projects going on in that part of Tijuana. Actually, in Proyecto Fronterizo de Educación Ambiental, that's an NGO in Tijuana that has 33 years old. We work in a project in 2023, 2024, where actually it's that specific space, it was in the Tijuana Septic shortcut. And we work with the community making community committees. So people, because it's a place where there was a slope and the street was fragmented, so the trash, the truck couldn't get in. The people burn the trash, or sometimes they put it in a hill. And we work with the community with separation projects and with compost, and it was really good. Community was responding very well. But yeah, there has been a lot of projects. We also had an executive project of making a park with native plants in that specific area where there was this slope. But it's like a continuous work, because you can go 2 years, but if you leave the community, sometimes the people that were participating goes into work, and the community, it's long-term investment. And I'm not talking only about money, but to time, to participation. And sometimes us as an organization could be to plant a seed, and after several years, like they're going to continue, but sometimes a couple of years not enough. But yeah, I think that that's the person you're talking about because he's like the long activist that has been there like, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago.
Okay, I would like to say something. Well, thank you everyone for being here. In 2019, we started this group together, and we wanted to understand better the health consequences, the health outcomes among the people who live inside the Tijuana River, and connect that with water quality information. So we started this group with ethnographers, physicians, harm reductionists, organizations work with environmental education, and with Mexicans, well, from Tijuana, also from LA, Pomona in that moment. And when we start going into the canal and like understanding the complexity of this situation, we open a box full of a lot of complexity, and we couldn't stop. We are here several years later. We started as a research project, but now we rethink about ourselves more like a binational project that aims not only the research piece, but also the advocate piece, the political incidents, and also the social consciousness. And one of the big pieces for the social consciousness is to organize these type of events where we can connect between activists and academics, but general public and anyone, and artists and filmmakers, and have this type of conversation with you and understand like different perspectives about the problem, because it's not one problem, it's like a very, very complex problem. We are in the crossest border worldwide. We are in probably the most important border in the world that separates the global north with the global south. We are talking about the corner of Latin America, and this border represents a lot of inequalities, but also a big opportunity to start like conversations about working together, about team play, and I just think that this is an opportunity to reflect about these topics. And I really love the idea about having film screening, because sometimes just looking at these films tell us more than we can say with words. And well, I have a lot of more things to say, but I will stop. Thank you.
Yes, I think we have, and then we have some.
Looking at the film, I asked myself, what is the government position? Now that you have established yourself and really want to see changes, you need to invite the president of Mexico to Tijuana. Let her see, like this movie, you need to show her it. Is this how you want your country to look like? The government should be involved. And if the government doesn't want to be involved, you need to ask her to leave, because it's bad.
When we start having results from this project, we wrote a letter to the governor of Baja California in that moment. We found that a lot of organizations and academics were like willing to sign this letter, and we submit this letter to everyone. We submit it to Congress men and women, to Senate, to a lot of like policymakers. And at the end, we have like a bunch of meetings with them, including a meeting not with the governor itself, but with the next person in charge after him. That was, I don't know, like before COVID, 2019. And in that moment, they were doing this cleaning of the river. And I want to pause a little bit about this cleaning because it sounds good, but it's not that good. It's not that good. One of the worst human rights violation in Tijuana occurred in 2014 and 15 in one of these cleanings. And still, there are some people that they still disappear. They disappear or be against their will in rehabilitation centers and things like that. From the social perspective, but also from the environmental perspective, with the support of these two pillars of our group, which are Preven Casa, which is a harm reduction clinic, community-based harm reduction clinic, and on the other hand, we have Proyecto Fronterizo Educación Ambiental, which is an environmental education NGO, both organization with decades, like 30 and 30-something years working in the region. One of the most important proposals is to decanalize a part of the river, to let the river do part of the cleaning that all rivers do, and make this space a river park. Using an example, the Tecate River. Tecate is the city east of Tijuana, and they did that, and it's the appropriation of public space, and well, it has a lot of ecological benefits. But what I want to say with this is that in that moment, we were thinking about harm reduction policies and also about creating a river park. But when we sit with them and we start talking about these like different actions from all these perspectives, from the research, from the ethnographers, from Preven Casa, from this environmental education organization, we realized that we didn't have an answer for them. They ask you, so what we should do? And we were like, well, we have a lot of ideas, but we don't have a plan. So based on that, we start a kind of like a workshop with stakeholders from Tijuana and San Diego that we invited to El Colef in 2023 when we present our results from our research. Actually, if someone can switch for the another one. Okay. This is a publication that where we put our results, and based on, we use theory of change and we use other methodologies to establish a solution. And if we, okay, just a couple of seconds, we can come back to it. Can we switch again for the next? Okay, we create this policy brief. This policy brief contains 7 objectives. 4 of them are focused on health and social aspects, and 3 of them on environmental actions. And each of these objectives have a specific actions, and if you take one of them from the table outside, at the very last page, specific sectors can go into specific actions that they can take to be part of this like comprehensive solution of the Tijuana River. However, we have a limitation that probably Rebecca can tell us what's next.
Well, I also wanted to point out a little bit more about one of the reasons that I joined the team was that I was working in Preven Casa previous to my post here, which is a harm reduction clinic and has a needle exchange program. And nearly 70% of the people who come to the needle exchange program are people who have been deported from the US. And most of these people live there. So just the way these issues intersect is really important. And even people who are working on these issues sometimes don't realize just the impact, the social impact, how it touches environmental impact, and how we can collaborate together. So as Adeli was saying, we developed these proposals and this brief with a group of experts in Tijuana to figure out what are specific actions that we can take. And if you look at the policy brief, these actions have been mostly focused in Tijuana, and part of the idea today was that so you can look at these and try to work with us and see what resonates with you. What do you think, which one of these solutions can translate into the San Diego area? We definitely need more government involvement, but we also need to extend our network and create a more robust binational network and more collaboration so that we can come up with these solutions while we get more support from the government. Because as you mentioned, people have been working on these issues for decades, and these issues also evolve. They also get more complex. So the idea is why Tara's here too, so that she can talk to us about the population of houseless individuals in San Diego, which goes to Tijuana, which goes back and forth, and we share very similar issues and problems. So we're trying to work together and make a more robust network.
Yeah, one of the things that we see, we do outreach all around San Diego County. We serve probably 10,000 people, not necessarily individually, person to person, but through secondary exchange for a lot of people. So we provide harm reduction supplies and services, which includes everything people need. I am a person who lived on the streets for a long time. I was a sex worker. I went to prison. I lost my kids. I did all the things and just to survive as a woman on the streets in San Diego. And I was a very chaotic heroin user, and I have a weird backstory. I have family that came to Sinaloa in the 1800s, and I have 19 members of my family that were murdered by the Arellano Felix cartel in 1998, and they're buried behind my house in Ensenada. So I have some like cross-border stuff, my own self one of my favorite pictures is me as this little girl, and there's 3 Mexican boys following me around, and I don't have a shirt on, and I told my mom, and I'm holding a Coca-Cola, and I'm like, I need that picture on my wall. But we have this beautiful relationship in San Diego with individuals on both sides of the border, and what I know personally and from the work I do is that the border is just a line that other people drew to separate people and to divide policy and a million other things. We do a lot of work on tribal land, and the tribal land crisscrosses all over the place. There are, some of my staff is native and has the little pass thing that you can cross through certain Kumeyaay land into Mexico. And in lots of those spaces, there are places for people to go. I have lived all along the southern border of San Diego County for years and years. I don't now, but I have lived out near Tecate. I've lived in those places. I know the things that occur like on that region, and it's where people are hiding. It's where people are accessing water through natural resources, through springs, through creeks, through all the things. It is where there's no place for trash or for to use the restroom or anything else. It's where it is, and a lot of folks are being smuggled, or they are paying to be moved through spots. People are being forced to go across the border to look for supply for certain medications or prescriptions, or because housing is cheaper, or drugs are cheaper, or different drugs are available, or whatever the reason may be, that there is a huge cross-border thing. And we see the impacts down in the riverbed near the border, and and I see it on the Zona Norte side I have a friend who's been looking for her dad in that area on the Tijuana side for a really long time, and she recently found him, and His story is horrible. It's horrible. And he was snatched up, put in treatment somewhere, been there for 8 years, and couldn't, like tons of things, lost his land, his home, everything. And he's now living in these conditions that are not okay. And we can have human rights violations all over the place. The fact of the matter is that you and I know better now, and we've got to do better. And so that means we need to think outside the box, because whatever we've been doing hasn't been working. We need to do a little bit more. If that means we just start, and it's little things we have to do. We can't think big projects right away, because there's a lot going on in this country right now and in the other country. One of the ways we've been able to build binational stuff is I work with worked with the U.S. State Department and the International Narcotics Law Enforcement and Trafficking Division of, and the Drug Demand Reduction Unit out of Mexico City to do some study tours across. It was started out as a binational and became trinational through U.S., Mexico, and Canada on a fentanyl committee. And they weren't tracking fentanyl deaths in Mexico, so of course they didn't have a problem. And they didn't have centralized places for information, and they didn't have adequate anything. There is no government training on naloxone use or distribution. You're not allowed to have it. And I don't know who's in this room, and I'm not sure who's filming, but there's a lot of naloxone that flows into Mexico's hands from somewhere. And the U.S. government and the Mexican government worked really closely together to in the last several years. We had Adrian Medina, the health secretary, or the whatever, I don't know the exact title, but we had him. We had the governor. We had all these people. We had studies. We had the research. We had the answers. We had the answers also for these things. And that stuff is gone. And so right now it's how do we, in the community, not rely so much on the government, but how do we build relationships between one and another, and we continue to do that, no matter where the people stand and no matter where the most important thing right now is that we don't let go of each other, because there's a lot of efforts right now for division, and we can't have that, and so, thank you.
Thanks. I think we had someone here.
These problems are so huge, it's hard, and have been there for so long, it's hard to get your head around really how to move forward. But I have two very specific questions. First, on the US side, it seems that the water issue, you really hear about it from folks who live in Imperial Beach, maybe occasionally Coronado, maybe more and more Coronado, but it's really that slice of folk who are, and the rest of San Diego maybe doesn't think about it so much. I'm wondering in Tijuana, so my first question, I'm wondering in Tijuana, is it something that everyone talks about, or has it been there so long, they're like, what can you do? It'll never change. So I'm just wondering sort of the feeling, since it's throughout the city, what I'm gathering. The second is, is there very specific health data about different populations? Maybe people who live in the canal as a population, the Border Patrol guys as another. Is there very specific health information published out there?
I don't know about the published thing, but what I know from seeing is we're seeing a huge increase in what is some sort of parasitic situations going on with individuals and who I was impacted after being in the floods in January a couple years ago, and several of my staff and a ton of outreach workers who were impacted in the San Diego River. And then in the Tijuana River, if you pay attention to other environmental stuff, seals and all these other animals are having some parasitic stuff, and that is an issue globally. It is not going to be fixed by a border, and people are kind of in, we're not considered a tropical region, which is, I don't know if you live here, but it can be very tropical, and that's been an issue that we're seeing that I have a hard time finding an answer for, because they don't test for it at the hospitals. It's a long like you have to measure, you have to have stool samples for days and days. It's a ton of things, because we don't mass deworm or provide preventative medications or opportunities for individuals to mitigate those risks of potential things that might be better treated or prevented with mass community treatment of certain basic medications.
I will also like to answer that. Well, yeah, there's a notion in Tijuana that the beach is polluted. Actually, the government has something that is called the Clean Beach Committee, where the 3 levels of authority participate, and also organizations, and it's a space where government decides whether they close the beach or they don't, based on a monitoring system. The problem is that it's closed since 2019, and you can see a lot of people going there. So it's something very weird, because, for example, in the pandemic, the beach was closed and no one was there. But for some reason, the local government specifically, doesn't take very seriously like the health impacts in the beach. There's a lot of families. In Tijuana, there's like economic division between the east and the west. So the people on the east sometimes has lower incomes than the people on the west. And the beach is a space where the people of the east tends to recreate, because in Tijuana there's not much parks, there's not much like spaces where they can go in the weekends. So yeah, officially the state government closes the beach. They emit in the official like paper. It's like a gaceta. I don't know how you call it here, but they declared like state of emergency, something very similar to what you want to do here. That was like in 2019. And people that lives in Playa de Tijuana has very clear that you cannot go into the beach because it smells actually. And also, like a little commercial, Proyecto Fronterizo de Educación Ambiental does monitoring in 5 points of the beach every week, every Thursday, and they publish on social media the results. Actually, the one that was made last week, it was read on all. In Mexico, we have different different criteria for enterococcus. For example, in the US, in a sample of 100 milliliters, you can only have 100, the most probable number, and in Mexico, it's 200. So you can have 199 in Mexico, and it's going to be like, okay. But in the US, it's close. Well, it doesn't. So in Proyecto Fronterizo, we have more than 10 years of data, and you can see most of the time, a specific beach that's called Playa Blanca, it's closed because it's the most close to the San Antonio de los Buenos, to the Punta Bandera treatment plant. So yeah, I cannot say because there's not like an official census that asks people in Tijuana, do you know if the beach is polluted? Actually, another commercial, Aleli is actually leading a research about what people in the US side and in Mexico side perceives about pollution, but maybe you can explain more.
Yeah, I actually was about to say that in the tables outside, you can also see a flyer about your interactions with the coastal area in Tijuana, Rosarito, and San Diego. I invite all of you to respond if you visit the coastal area for any reason, and we want to understand the health risks associated with the interaction with the coastal area, and also to understand exactly where. Because you say there are specific red points, but it's not the whole coastline, right? And about health public information, well, I invite you to read our paper. We have all the data, the descriptive data about the population. This data is from 2019 and 20, but we also have another paper that is in way about disabilities among people who live inside the Tijuana River. I can spoil the response is about 50% of them. So half of the people who live inside the Tijuana River has a disability, which is also a big topic. And so we are also describing some other health outcomes among this population. And these, I hope that this paper will be out in this next, this year. And yeah, well, these are the big topics about that. I know that there are like surveys, like, I know, like theses from UABC or Ecolef about health outcomes in the people who live around the Alamar area, which is one of the pieces of the river.
Yeah, actually, one of the theses is from Stephanie Medina, that is part of the team, and she made her thesis about Arroyo Alamar and exactly that. So you can.
Appreciate it, thank you. Okay, regarding the Alamar River, in which I made my thesis about, not everyone in Tijuana is aware that the Alamar is actually a river. So one of the works that I read for making my thesis, and also the people that I interviewed, they told me like the general public does not like, they are not aware that the river is a river. They see only a canal, like they just see only the cement, and they see it as normal. And that has a lot of to do with access to education, environmental education in general. And I mean, I wasn't aware as well that that was a river until I started my career in environmental engineering. I wasn't aware that the canal was actually a river, that the Alamar River was a river, and I wasn't even aware of the pollution. I mean, I wasn't aware that Tijuana was polluted. There is actually public information about the levels of pollution in the water. Those are published by the federal government, Conagua. They do some, they collect water samples periodically. I don't quite remember right now how frequently they do that. They have certain criteria to measure the water quality. However, it's not enough data to provide you like in real time, like how polluted the water is. And that's data that is not like easily available to the general public. It's not something that you see like published in social media. And in order for you to actually interpret those data, you should have like some kind of higher education to actually interpret those numbers and to actually understand what they mean. Because you see like SST and you're like, what is that, right? It's like suspended solids. But what is a suspended solid? What does that mean? What does it mean when you read like huevos del minto? ¿A qué se refiere? What do they mean? So that's one thing, no? So it's hard for people to actually be aware that the air, that the water is polluted. I mean, they can be aware that there's a bad smell. And I'm not talking like only about the sea. I'm talking about like the rivers, the creeks. I'm aware of that because I live near to a creek, and it's actually very polluted. I don't even open my windows on my room because I get like these sprays of polluted water on my windows, so I don't open the windows because I am aware of that. But most likely my neighbors are not aware of the dangers of that pollution. And I live in an industrial area. I'm from the east side of Tijuana, actually. I'm part of that population, low-income population. And not everyone is actually aware. And regarding the government, I mean, the government is not like a unified entity. It's actually different stakeholders with different interests. And talking about pollution, it's very political, and it's actually, it's like highly correlated or is intrinsically related to economy. And when you start to talk about an issue related to pollution, and you start to like point fingers at the ones that are polluting, they have economic interests. I mean, there's industrial, we have maquilas, we have industrial complexes, and they are polluting the water, right? But they provide jobs, and they are not allowed to exist somewhere else, because in Mexico our regulations are like weaker than in first world countries. So that's why we get like those enterprises. They provide jobs, and they pay low wages. Environmental regulations are not as strong as in first world countries. So it's the perfect place for those industries to exist and thrive and profit at the expense of our health. So it has a lot to do with economy, and keeping people away from knowledge, from knowing this, is what keeps those industries thriving in our communities.
I think we had a question over there.
All right, so I just wanted to thank you for being here and having this panel, and also showcasing some of these films. My name is Ramon Chaires. I work for an organization called Un Mar de Colores. We do advocacy work with the Tijuana River. I grew up next to that river valley on the American side in San Isidro. I learned how to surf in IB. I learned how to grow food in the river valley at Wild Willow Farm, which is coincidentally closing very soon. I have just one comment and then a question for you all. And so we know that the population increase in Tijuana has a lot to do with NAFTA and a massive population boom as a result of a lot of these maquiladoras coming to Tijuana. And that's just not Tijuana, that's all across the border cities, right? Matamoros, Juarez. They also have black water issues, very similar, except that the topography, particularly in Tijuana, is very challenging. And so as the films showcased, we have all these irregular settlements happening along the canyons and not access to sewage drainage. And so my question has a lot to do with the maquiladoras, because we're at the nexus of the biggest trade agreement that we have between the three countries, and there's billions of dollars being exchanged at this border on a daily basis. So they're making money, they're just not investing in the infrastructure. And so how do we get to a point where we can hold not just these agencies accountable? And I'm not just talking about Mexico, I'm talking about the US. They're making our products down there. Those are American corporations, those are California corporations, right? And you can argue that, Tijuana exists as a city that's there to provide American comfort, whether it was gambling, or prohibition, prostitution. When we needed braceros, we were happy to have them. When we didn't need them, we kicked them back to Mexico, and they ended up in Tijuana working in maquiladoras, making products for us. So how do we hold them accountable? And so my question to you, to the panel is there any space where we're bringing the maquiladoras together to talk about how we can enforce regulation, right? How can we bring them together? Because they're not paying their fair share, right? They're not.
I want to add that the cartels also play a huge part in that. If you look at the way that the environment is impacted by unregulated drug markets and unregulated stuff, that they have no regulations. They're out clearing land, they're doing all this stuff, dumping tons of chemicals. Tijuana and US, I don't know if anyone's paying attention to the news, it's a mess when it comes to drugs, and there is a lot of activity on that border that the cartel is involved in one form or fashion or another. And I do believe that it would be great business of them to invest in their own community. And I don't know how to do that. I just know that the way I have found to get things done is to speak person to person and then work from there. Because when I try to bring in bigger groups, it's hard. And sometimes I just have to start a small relationship and get one person interested and kind of work from there and start that fire. But I don't have a good answer. And I'll tell you, I'm embarrassed and ashamed as a U.S. citizen about what's going on in this country and what we're doing to the country of Mexico. It is horrifying to see the way we are treating individuals. And so not only do we have to look at this as like a water issue, but we have to look at this as an issue that goes a lot farther than that. And how are we going to fix the river if we can't even have a conversation and people are being kicked out of spaces and not allowed in places? How do we make that river the place that we all heal? How do we come back and bring tradition into that spot along the riverbed? We are Tijuana and San Diego now, but 500 years ago, it was not that way. How do we get the borders? No, we can't take them down right now, at least. But how do we build that space? We have the border parks. We have these other things. How do we create a space that's intentional for people to come and explore those conversations, having listening sessions at the border on a regular basis, the first Tuesday, whatever it is, having something that people can come back to and continue to check in and work together and come up with solutions, because y'all have great ideas. So we just need to work together. Maybe these governments aren't who we need to rely upon, and we need to go back to the communities and save ourselves, because the governments aren't coming for us in all the ways. I'm sorry to say that, and you may disagree with me, but I can't wait for them to fix this. I have to do what I can do today, and I implore you to do the same. I don't know what that looks like, but it's got to look like something. We owe each other better than that.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Yeah, actually, that's something the paper points out very well, and Aleli always points that out too. Like the relationship between NAFTA and the growth population in Tijuana. That's in the 90s there were less than 1 million people in Tijuana, and now we have approximately 2 million, maybe more, because the last census was in 2020, and it's the most populated city in Mexico, so as a municipality. So there's a lot of issues. It's a very complex aspect. Actually, I was reading the data about how much money does people, manufacturers, owe to CESP, that's the organism that manage water, and we're talking about 6 billion pesos, so it's approximately $342 million. So yeah, it's complex, and you don't have enough money, and the planning isn't very good, because governments are, changing every 3 years or changing every 6 years. Actually, that's something I'm working like academically, because there's a lot of changes in the heads, in the directors of the organismo operador that is in charge of water management in Tijuana. So you cannot plan, because you are using the director of CESP as a political, position. So yeah, it's very hard, and actually, because we're thinking about solution at the end of the tube, like we want to treat water when it's already like very polluted, and that's very expensive. We're talking about energy, we're talking about maintenance. So CESP hasn't, and you can correct me, because Francisco has a lot of experience in managing water treatment plants, and it's very expensive solution. So what we as a group, we want to point out is that we have like two perspectives. We have the ecosystem perspective, we have the integrated watershed perspective, and we also have the human right and environmental justice perspective. So we cannot work without one or the other. And we also promote a lot of nature-based solution. There's a project in Tijuana. There's a lot of projects in the state, but one in Tijuana, it's called Ecoparque, and actually they use the water that it's up in the hill, and they use like the gravity to treat water with plants with very low budget. So we want to like promote those aspects and have a lot of ecoparques in Tijuana, but it hasn't been a priority in Tijuana because we have the Colorado River. We are not enough aware and enough worried about what water. We have very low rates of reuse. We have only like 2% reuse. So we're using water at a very expensive energy cost. We're pumping the water from Mexicali to La Rumorosa, and it's very expensive for Tijuana. We have one of the expensive tariffs to the people, and we're not even reusing it, so it's nonsense, actually.
I want to read something from our paper just to highlight what you were saying, what I think is very important and one of the big complex pieces of this set of problems, the corporations. I searched for the proportion of U.S. industries in the Tijuana industrial area, and I couldn't find it. At least it's not easy to find, so we don't know where are these industries came from. I know that most of them are from the US, but I actually don't have the data for that. But it's in combination with tax exemptions, subsidies to corporations, weaken the capacity for environmental protection regulations, partially privatize wastewater management, and drive underinvestment in wastewater systems and infrastructure. So these are just some of the mechanisms in how industries are constantly discharging pollutants into the river. Because river, we see there is a lot of wastewater, but there is also contamination from industry that is out of control right now. And I think when you mention about how can we start, which pieces of the solutions are in these sides of the border, I think it's our conversation about the role of the U.S. corporations. It's a good piece to include.
Yes.
I've lived in this area for 13 years now, and so I'm not a Californian.
I've lived in Pacific Beach for 13 years now, and I'm not a Californian, and I came out here actually, I grew up in Kentucky, but then I lived in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. Everything is so different in Southern California than I've ever experienced, and it's why is it so that people just want to ignore the issues rather than take on the issues? And I had heard last year that this water treatment plant was going to start this last fall of 2024. They were going to start addressing it. And first of all, I want to know if that is happening. And second, when I live right near the beach, so as soon as I moved there, I started doing beach cleanups. My degree's in sustainable community development, and there are plenty of places in the United States that have had serious problems, and they were forced to deal with it. And I don't know if it's because it's in Mexico and people are not communicating. I just don't understand why this is not a priority. This is horrible. I mean, it's beyond, it's unconscionable that people are living this way, and not, I mean, when people say to me, "You've never been to Mexico," and I say no, but I give things to a shelter down in Mexico. Some people I give things to, they take it down. This church takes, they say there's 34 shelters in Tijuana, and they're helping with 2 shelters. At least I feel good, at least I'm doing something to help in that way. But as far as how they can't tell people this is not a livable place, and you know, there are ways to be sustainable and live off the grid and to have compost, you know, collecting the rainwater. My daughter in Tucson, Arizona has a nonprofit on how to collect rainwater. They do education all the time about how to live sustainably. And I'm like, it was in the paper recently that Coast Keepers has sued SeaWorld because of the bacteria that has accumulated from the fireworks there. So we try to bring attention to these problems. I don't know if the public really cares. They'd rather have fireworks than have clean air. I just don't understand the mentality. If you could address some of this, please.
Yeah, I would like to start actually by also a comment that was one of the first one about what government is doing about this. And Aleli and I were talking about like Tijuana, and the northern region is actually one of the regions where most people have sanitation infrastructure. If we compare it with the south of Mexico, approximately 30% in states like Oaxaca or Chiapas had sanitation infrastructure. So in Tijuana, we approximately have 88 sanitation. That is not the same as treatment. Treatment, well, the percentage of water treatment is approximately 45. Yeah, that's the last data I have. So government, I think it's I'm not going to justify anything, but we don't have the same budget as the US or as a first world country. So it's not also an homogeneous, it's not homogeneous, because there's a lot of entities. There's an entity that is in charge of human, health, and it's in charge of verifying that the beach has certain amount of bacteria, but there's another institution that is in charge of water treatment plants, and there's another institution that's only in charge of health. So it's hard because there's a lot of stakeholders and a lot of fragmentation and a lot of communication. Sometimes it's difficult, the communication between us, Mexico's entities, so it's even harder to tell your US neighbor that, you know what, I can do what you're asking me because I have, security issues, because I have poverty issues, because I have hunger issues. That there's other priorities coexisting with the sewage aspect. So we are in a very asymmetric society. So we cannot talk about 100% of treatment if we don't have another necessities that are being covered. Yeah. Also,
sorry, we need to wrap up. Just if you want to close your.
Yeah, some question that was that I see on the Mentimeter. They were asking about, I think, Uranus, something like that. That like, what does wastewater had? And well, there's a quality test that does IVWC and the Mexican government with SILA, and it's something that they subcontract. So the main, the problems are with ammonia, BOD, that's biochemical oxygen demand, oil and grease, phosphorus, and coliform bacteria, nitrates. But yeah, I couldn't find Uranus that you were asking. And yeah, that's it.
Sorry, unfortunately we have to wrap up. Just to close up, wanted to thank everyone. And I think there's an important point here about how does all of this intersect, how does it relate to peace and violence, and which is one of the reasons we're here as well. And one of the things that we can do is to question our own narratives around these issues and why we think we have these issues and what are the solutions. I think there was a question earlier about what's the feel in Tijuana, or how do people perceive what's going on on that side of the border. We saw it on the documentary too, saying if you look at it from the perspective of the people who are living in these settlements, they're surviving. They're doing things the best way that they can simply to survive. When we look at the people who are living in the canal and where they come from, like I mentioned, most of the people there are people who have been deported from the U.S. Whenever they come in contact with the water, you can see it in the research. It's not because they want to touch the water. It's most of the times because they're running away from police. It's because they're also just trying to survive. So questioning our own narratives and how all of these issues intersect is important to try to come up with more sustainable solutions that are also human rights focused and look at everyone's perspective. Sorry.
I was just going to say, you're coming around the issue that I want to mention, and that is because San Ysidro is the poor sisters of San Diego. If these problems were occurring in Del Mar, they would have been solved. We have a national estuary that was established in the 1970s, because I'm a biologist, because of clapper whales being an endangered species. They've done nothing. It's a national estuary in the United States. The American way is to have lawsuits when there's pollution. So I wanted to ask just quickly, what kind of legal background do you have? Because I see this as a prejudice, and you're mentioning it in Tijuana, that there's a right and a wrong side of the tracks. And like I'm saying, even though Chula Vista has now expanded since you've been here into a richer area, but old Chula Vista and San Ysidro were forgotten. And because the national estuary is in that area, it is sort of forgotten, and the money from the county and the national attention is going to Del Mar, is going to upper beaches in La Jolla and places like that. So I think there's a real prejudice, an economic prejudice of where the money is going. So I think that the American way would be lawsuits. The American way would be calling attention with the Environmental Protection Agency. But we're not politically interested in that anymore right now. So we need to have you people spread the word and get us as voters to make a difference. Otherwise, we have 3 Mile Island, we have things that happened all over the United States that were this bad, and were not addressed until there was law. I hate to say it, I'm not an attorney, but that's the capitalistic way. You make someone pay for it.
Thank you so much for that. I wish we could continue the conversation, and please follow us on social media. Can you move to the? And yeah, reach out if you're interested in knowing more about the work or collaborating. Thank you so much.